Mazzy's back from Portland, Oregon with a new VC find, new record haul, VCLT, thank you, a milestone, thank you, new records, new old records. I've had my San Francisco friends back to back visits with more coming through tonight. So quickly, this is a record I picked up that's on in the background for right now. This is Dave Seville, his first album. You all know who Dave Seville is, even if you don't. Does that make any sense? Dave Seville. Dave as Alvin Simon Theodore with the Chipmunks. He does all the voices for the original Chipmunks. Alvin! That's Dave Seville. Another bit of trivia. He was the jazz lonely single piano player, not the lonely guy, but at the apartment on the right, Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock movie, where he had the party. He was the guy on the right in Rear Window. The movie you should all see if you haven't seen it yet, Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah, 60 years? Come on, see the friggin' film. But this will be on the background, as will driving street scenes of Portland, Oregon. Not my footage from YouTube, though. A little ambiance, so. Nextly, is that a word? Nextly. Huxley, next. I got back from Portland and I noticed I hit the 500 mark for subscribers. I need to celebrate. I need to come up with a contest. I've been swamped. I haven't been here. I got friends back to back. So hopefully next week I can jump in and create a thank you. Thanks again. I think I'm in over 503 now or something. But 500, that's quite the milestone and I really appreciate it. So thank you. And lastly, in the intro section here, Melinda Murphy. Yeah, I've been sending her, we did a little, well, you know she's a McCartney fan, and especially Band on the Run, and her husband, I guess her family, her and her husband saw McCartney, a local to them. She's from Kentucky. I saw him in Vancouver, British Columbia, 2-3 weeks ago. And I got a second, because of this ticket thing, I got 2 sets of swag, as they say. So I sent her a VCLT of McCartney, Macca, Paul McCartney, Macca swag. And she wrote me and was very appreciative. But, you know, I want to turn people onto stuff when they don't have it or they're really into something. And that would have just set a second set. So I saw right away where it needed to go. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Melinda. But look what she sent me. She didn't want to send me records, she said, because I have all these records. And I'm a hard person to buy for, even my family, my friends, in terms of music, because I have so much. But Kentucky bourbon, the real deal, the real cool, real deal with the horse, as you know, the Kentucky Derby. Race to the finish. Blanton's original single barrel whiskey, bottle number 135. What a I'm gonna pop this open tonight. Maybe get one of those big giant square mixologist ice cubes. This is barrel number 1742 on Rick number 56. Individually selected, filtered, and bottled by hand at 93 proof. This is gonna, well, we're gonna have to do a video with this stuff too. But again, thank you, Melinda. Really sweet of you. This is good stuff and from Kentucky. So that makes it even more special. I'm touched. Or as my people say, I'm verklempt. You can look it up, verklempt in Yiddish. It's a good word for this. Thank you, Melinda. Appreciate it. So guests from San Francisco. You saw Brooks came by last week. Was my first college roommate, my fan who turned me on early to jazz, knows a lot about jazz. We did 2 Jazz Shit Boy videos, which are amongst my most popular videos now. So, you know, it's team effort. You know, if we were here, maybe we'd do that on a continuous level. But good stuff. We did the Music Matters Jazz with the Tone Poets and being 80s. And we just did a general random jazz thing down in my record room. Okay. And then my friend Coleman, who is from San Francisco, a musician, he came. We overlapped today. We did some eating, drinking, and playing music. We jammed downstairs. And Coleman's my vinyl buddy. So we jammed. Brooks left. Coleman and I went down to Portland, did some record shopping, came back. He just went to the airport. Tonight, my friend David, who I did the Beatles England book with, is coming through, and just for 2 nights, so hopefully we'll get to do one. Okay, jazz and pop finds. So, I'm a big Donovan fan. Love Donovan. 60s stuff, definitely. Into some of the 70s stuff. You know, he had maybe a up and down checkered thing. One record that has to come out on vinyl, one of his records in the, I guess early 90s, mid 90s, was produced by Rick Rubin called Sutras. I love it, I have the CD, but that's not on vinyl. I hope they issue that someday. But there's a record he did in 1971, double record, a children's record called HMS Donovan. Came out only in the UK, and Epic refused to release it here. You kind of, when you listen to it, understand why. These songs he started writing these songs in 1968, and Paul McCartney, when he was hanging out with the Beatles up in, with the Maharishi, when Donovan taught John and Paul that special finger picking that they both use on the White Album quite a bit. This album starts out kind of weird, folky, psychedelic, bizarre, talking and things. Got some great songs. I'm not going to get into detail about it, but he's very twee. Donovan does twee better than most people do twee. And if you don't know what twee is, figure it out. Double record. I've been looking for this record literally for a decade. You can find it over $100 sometimes on Discogs and here and there, once in a while cheaper. I haven't seen it since the 70s in a store anywhere. And it's pretty rare. I found it in Crossroads, which is basically in Portland, Oregon, an antique mall of only records. So vendors have a whole section of record bins are coded, so you bring it up to the register and that vendor gets the credit for their records. I got a bunch of stuff there. Crossroads Records, I'd been there about 3 years ago, but in the last couple years they moved, so it's a new space. Well worth the trip. The Pacific Northwest is a treasure trove of record stores. There's Portland, a dozen or more, Seattle, 15, 16 or more. Tacoma, Washington has one of the best of all 3 places, and that's High Voltage. Anyway, we stopped there too on the way. Great record. So I find this is a later issue, still in the 70s, not, way recent because it hasn't been reissued. Pristine shape. But I kind of was looking for an original. But then, of course, the next day, I find this. I've been looking for 10 years. I find 2 copies. So once I figure out which one I want to keep, I'll probably sell the other one, trade the other one, we'll figure it out. But Donovan, HMS Donovan. My buddy Coleman made me buy this. I already had it, but this is an RL and hand etched, which all that complicated, better quality bullshit pressing stuff, which is true too, but I don't usually do that. But when my friend Coleman, who's my record maven in terms of pressings and things, puts something in my hand, I have to get it. So we'll see how it compares to my other copy that I have, which I think my other copy is a later orange label. This is, I believe, this is the orange label, a split seam note. So, but it's a good one. Great live album with horn sections arranged by John Simon. So if you like the band, you like this. Common record, but, I always love, this is my favorite Simon & Garfunkel record. I have it. I have a reissue, or not reissue, but a later mid-70s Columbia. So this is the original pressing. And what's great about it, it's pristine shape, as is the cover, and a pristine poster. I no longer have the poster because I had put it up in my room when I was a kid. No staple holes. Perfect. Cover here by Richard Avedon. Okay. One of my favorite albums, I have a reissue of this, or a later pressing, and I found an original, Camper Van Beethoven, Independent Project Records. And what's great about this was manufactured in the U.S. by Rough Trade, and they used to have, I noticed on here, and I'd forgotten they were hooked up with Rough Trade. Their first and only, I think, American store until recently in Brooklyn in the 80s was on 6th Street, south of Market. We used to go there and get punk and new wave singles there. But this is really nice. A little crunchy, but a nice independent version. This, of course, has the infamous song, Take the Skinheads Bowling. And if you don't know Camper Van Beethoven, you've heard that song. Michael, Bowling for Columbine, the opening song, that documentary about gun violence is this version of them. And then, of course, David Lowery went on and formed Cracker. And now Cracker and Camper Van Beethoven tour together. One opens up and they keep flipping it out. A few other things before I go into the jazz stuff. John Barry, soundtrack, Parlophone, flip back covers, full back covers. Actually, it's Columbia, I'm sorry. Columbia copy, great cover. If you don't know him, composer, he did probably the first 5 James Bond scores of motion pictures. He didn't write the James Bond theme song, Monty Norman did, but he arranged it. So, very cool record, very cool cover, soundtracky. Best of Freddie King on Shelter Records. Great blues record, really good blues record, great sounding blues record. And then lastly, right here, I had this record back in the 70s and during my 90s purge, got rid of it. John and Beverly Martin, produced by Joe Boyd. What should we put on? Let's see here. How about John Barry? I don't want to put any kind of things that's going to be possibly copyright blocked, as they say. So we're going to go with John Barry, Upside Down, on Columbia. And look at this, Columbia. Look at this label. Isn't that cool? So, from Dave Seville to John Barry. You've heard this stuff. Anyway, great folk. John Boyd produced the very first Pink Floyd single. He had American Expatriate, who had a club, was a partner club called the UFO Club in London during the psychedelic time of 66, 67. The house band at the time was Pink Floyd. He also produced and discovered, John Martin, Maria Muldaur, and Jeff Muldaur. He produced her first solo album. That was later in the 70s. He discovered the incredible string band. Oh, Nick Drake. There we go, Nick Drake. Very folky, kind of folk rock, folk-based, Pentangle. You should know about Joe Boyd. Great bio I read last year. Now, I'm going to go quickly through the jazz. These 70s reissues I'm a big fan of. Black California, Sonny Chris, Slim Gaillard, Roy Porter, Big Band, Eric Dolphy, Helen Humes, Hampton Hawes, Art Pepper, although Art Pepper obviously is not black, but around that time some really cool stuff. In the 40s and 50s these were recorded. A nice ABC Impulse later pressing of John Quartet doing kind of Chim Chim Cheree, so it's kind of the the jazz cover light stuff, but still a great album. This is a 70s press, but still good. Another Coltrane, Meditations. Rosson Roland Kirk, Natural Black Inventions. Root Strata. If you don't know Rosson Roland Kirk, you need to know him. He was a guy that would play 3 reed instruments at once, like literally 3 saxophones in his mouth, playing them at once. How's that for a hot date, right? Rosson Roland Kirk, Atlantic Records. Jimmy Smith on Verve. This record sounds great too. Organ player, arranged by Oliver Nelson. I've been looking for this for a while. I see reissues. I didn't want to reissue, although this is a 90s, late 80s or 90s Japan issue, and it sounds fabulous. This is recorded in Club Fugazi, which was an open room club in North Beach, San Francisco, as a solo studio, semi-studio style recording alone, the night after he opened a run at the famous Jazz Black Hawk Club in San Francisco. And as you know, anything San Francisco, cable car, you know, I need to get. The new wave is on. Verve, Gil Evans, Into the Hot, the Gil Evans Orchestra. Probably know Gil Evans, working with Miles a lot of other jazz artists. Great composer, arranger, orchestra leader. So, I like Gil Evans. Tone Poet just put out something his too. The best of Mac Roach and Clifford Brown in concert. I couldn't resist the cover, but I like a lot of 40s jazz. I don't see a lot around here. Everything is Blue Note and Verve and that kind of stuff, which I like. But, I mean, you know, Pork Pie Hat, Lester Young, and Clifford Brown, and all, you know, Louis Armstrong, all that kind of stuff. And speaking about Louis, oh, and also Duke Ellington. Now, I got this because it's a Seattle concert, and now that I live in Seattle, I just thought it'd be a cool thing. And I'm trying to figure out, I got to do some research where it was recorded in Seattle. I live in the South End, which was a big African-American jazz area back in the day, in the 40s and 50s, in terms of music too. So it's possible this was recorded in or around my neighborhood. So it's kind of cool thing. But anything Duke Ellington and Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, I love that stuff. Coltrane reissues, ABC. In fact, this is a record that came out when I worked for ABC Records in the 70s. I used to have it. It's basically a reissue, unreleased takes, recorded from early '63. So before he went with the freeform stuff, a little more melodic. 62, 63, 64. But these always sound good. And it's funny, I say this over and over again, a lot of these kind of records don't get love here. You know, everybody wants the originals or the original version, but a lot of the, you know, mid to late 70s reissue stuff, again, like this too. Cannonball Adderley, Savoy Sessions, all this stuff is great, great jazz. And again, you usually can find these hardly played at all. They're usually in tip-top shape. Now, I don't know why I was in a Herbie Mann mood. Herbie Mann can be really wonderful or it can be embarrassing. As you know, the VC gets a lot of hipsters and jokers like to showing that album him with his shirt off holding his flute later. I don't have that one, but look at these covers. I mean, this is good period stuff, early 60s, I believe. Let's see, when was this recorded? Does it even say? I don't know. 1968, 66 and 68. So right in there during the heyday of rock and roll coming, but very cool modern art covers. So Atlantic Records, pristine copies, Herbie Mann. Had to add them to the collection. Same with this, Errol Garner. Great pianist. Some people think he's a little too melodic, a little too laid back. People know the Errol Gardner Concerts by the Sea in Carmel, California series. But again, I went for it because of the cover, but also I love his piano playing. Great Sunday morning record. Cannonball Adderley in San Francisco at the infamous Jazz Workshop, which was a club in San Francisco in the 50s. With Nat Adderley. So the brothers playing there. Who else is on it? Bobby Timmons, Sam Jones, Louis Hayes. October 1959, Riverside Records, the Riverside label. Maybe Orrin Keep News? Well, this is a later one because this is when Fantasy Records picked up Riverside. So this is probably a late 60s, maybe early 70s copy. But great music, right? It's great music. Who the fuck cares? Okay. More Jimmy Smith. If you like kind of that, your mojo working, get your mojo out. Jimmy Smith, mojo, jazzy, funky, kind of party music. Really great stuff. Okay. This is a 70s reissue. I didn't have this record. This is one of those nice price Columbia, probably from 75 or so. Now, Monk and, I don't think Monk and Miles Davis ever really played together. They're not playing together here. At the same festival, one side is Monk and the other side is the Miles Davis Sextet. So this is from, what is this from? 63, I believe. So there we go. Up. Another Herbie Mann, great 60s Herbie Mann Atlantic cover. I went through My Kind of Groove. My Kind of Groove. That can be your kind of groove too, my friends. Okay, got this because we all know Watermelon Man, Herbie Hancock, right? But the top 10 hit, or I don't know if it was the top 10, but what hits the charts was the version by Mongo Santeria. Look at that cover. I mean, hey, it's a fun 60s romp, right? I mean, sexy, not sexist, just kind of dance. You're like VPL. They could have got rid of the VPL and retouching. I don't know if you know what VPL is, but they could have done that. But it's got La Bamba, Watermelon Man, Summertime, kind of a bossa nova thing going, and a La Bamba, Southern, you know, Cuban and Latin, and just really fun stuff. But right after Mongo, I'm gonna go back to rock and roll because Mongo meet Mungo. Mungo and Mongo. And I only got this because I've never had this album. I used to have this, I think I still have the single. 1970, probably one of the funnest summer singles ever. In the summertime when the weather is fine, Mungo Jerry. So a pristine, perfect record, 1970, Janus Records. I couldn't resist. I have no idea if the whole record is good. Ooh. A streetcar just went through my head. Bought this for the cover, but I told you a few minutes ago I love me some Satchmo. So, Ambassador Satch, Louis Armstrong, Satchmo, Columbia. This is probably from the 40s or 50s, 55, probably the mid-50s, you know? Oh, somebody doesn't want me to put records in the slot. It takes up too much time putting them away. They're right. You know, you should put your records in a slot later, after not waste a video's time. Also, I suggested, because one thing I never used to do, and someone suggested me, and I think some suggested someone else, hold the covers up so we can see them for a while. Anyway, I went through a Wes Montgomery mood too. Greatest Hits A&M 60s version. I haven't heard this yet. I'm not sure if the sound is good because they did some weird stuff at the time on these record labels when they were merging mono and stereo and weird mastering and stuff. So I don't have high hopes for this, but it was cheap. I got it, but I got these two, which I just haven't had in a while. This is a perfect Verve copy, probably an original, and I can't remember. It's a stereo version, but it's funny. I was thinking when I was playing, it's a song, California Dreamin', the Mamas and Papas song, so it's kind of light and funk and funky and that kind of Wes Montgomery thing. You know, Wes Montgomery started, he only played like strumming with his hands, no pick, and in 65 he started doing sort of pop covers and made a shitload of money, sold a shitload of records. Hey, anytime a jazz artist can sell music, is that selling out? So be it. They're fun stuff. 65, 66, 67. He died in 68, had a heart attack in his 40s. Sad, but this is a fun record, and of course, I have to have it because of the whole San Francisco vibe. But what was interesting about this, okay, this is a Pete Turner photograph, CTI, this is when they were with A&M, then Creed Taylor, this is his label, who worked with Verve before that. But what's interesting about this, Dom Sebesky sort of overproduces the orchestration in The Day in a Life, but the guitar stuff is great by Wes Montgomery. But what's really interesting about this, and I just noticed this today, I hadn't noticed, this is recorded June 6th, 7th, 8th, and 26th in 1967. Sgt. Pepper came out, I believe, June 6th. in 67. So literally, Wes Montgomery got Sgt. Pepper, heard Sgt. Pepper, and either that week or 2 weeks later or so, recorded A Day in a Life and named his album after it. How cool is that, right? Sad he died so young. But what's great on this record is like Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Grady Tate on drums, a bunch of other artists. Then there's a few weird picks. Well, it was recorded by Rudy Van Gelder, was the engineer. Arranged and conducted by Don Sebesky. But anyway, A Day in the Life. And I'm going to end with some random things that aren't very collectible, but I just was in the mood for. Switched on Bach 2, Walter Carlos. If you know the story, he is now Wendy Carlos soon after this. He did the Switch. I love Switched on Bach. I got that as a kid. It got me into classical too, as did some other things. And the whole Moog synthesizer things, they're fun listens. So this is like a perfect copy of Switched on Bach 2. Josh White at Town Hall. One of my favorite bluesy folk, more folk than blues, but this is a great record, and it's on Mercury, and it's Town Hall in New York City. I love Josh White. Anytime I see a Josh White record, I suggest, even if you don't like the heavier blues stuff, it's more of a folk singer type thing. Acoustic most of the time. Really, really wonderful artist, Josh White. You need Josh White. Mazzy says, Enoch Light, I have a whole thing of Enoch Light. If you don't know Enoch Light, he did all those ping pong records in the late 50s, early 60s. They call them ping pong because all the bongos and percussion, left and right, wide stereo, when the whole, quote, not to sound sexist again, but the Bachelor home stereo thing was starting out, and high fidelity, hi-fi, you know. You've seen the pictures, the whole Playboy listening to hi-fi, but Enoch Light did a lot of those records that sound amazing. They're kind of jazzy pop, but jazzy, Latin-y. Look at that. Anyway, I didn't have this one, so anytime I see Enoch Light, like provocative percussion, persuasive percussion, I have a bin over there. There's an earlier video, one of my very first videos, I showed part of that collection. So if you're interested in these, seek that out. But I picked those up. And two, lastly, that's the Tom Rush folk singer. I love Tom Rush. I have all his albums. It was just cheap, and I figured the greatest hits would be fun to have. And then Round Midnight. And one of my photographers who I mentioned here, Michelle Clement, was on set when they filmed this. Dexter Gordon. I think it was Bernard Travenier, French director, made this movie around 88, 89, I believe, 87 maybe. I think, or it came out in 90 maybe. Anyway, I mean, it's got all these cameos with, you know, Ron Carter and Tony Williams, and Michelle was on set shooting a lot of on-set photography for this. Herbie Hancock, Bobby Hutcherson, Bobby McFerrin, Lynette McKee, John McLaughlin, Wayne Shorter, Cedar Williams, Tony Williams, Ron Carter, Dexter Gordon, Chet Baker. You know, I never had, I think I have the CD, but I found this for like $5 or $6, so I thought it'd be a great find on Columbia Records. Anyway, a lot to cover here. Maybe we'll do some more at some point, but we're about to hit 30 minutes. Hope I didn't bore you too much. Mazzy loves you, and again, thanks for 500 visitors or subscribers. Thanks for the bourbon, Melinda Murphy, and thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. We'll do some celebrating soon. Take care. Mazzy loves you. Bye.